Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our second round of community workshops. Our first round of workshops were held back in February, where we had a really great turnout. My name is Carol Chariot, and I'm the project manager for the Pruneridge Avenue Complete Streets Plan. Next. If you can't stay the whole time with us, that's all right, but please make sure to stay connected via our dedicated webpage for the project, or leave us an email, or leave us a voicemail, which would be great. And just to let you know that these two sessions, the one held Thursday night and today, will be recorded, and I will make sure to post them on the webpage. Next page. The agenda for this afternoon is I'll give brief introductions for city staff and our consultant staff. We'll do a really brief tutorial on Zoom and Poll Everywhere. We'll have 2 question and answer sessions, and we'll do a brief update of what we've been doing since the last community workshops. And a majority of our time will be spent on looking at our corridor design concepts and pedestrian intersection improvements for the project. And then finally, we'll go over next steps for the project. Next. Once again, my name's Carol Chariot, and I'm the project manager. I also have with me here today Michael Liu, our Assistant Public Works Director, Jonathan Yee, our Transportation Manager, and our consultant staff from Alta Planning and Design. I have Jeff Knowles, Ryan Booth, and Ben Frazier. Next. As I said, we are at our second round of community workshops, and where we're really excited to share with you our draft roadway concepts. And then in less than a year, we will bring to you our public draft plan and also our revised roadway concepts based on comments we heard from you, the public, and our committees and commissions. And then in about a year, we'll also take the plan to City Council for review and consideration. Please do remember that this is a planning level document, and the city does not have any funds to do design or construction of the project. Next. So once again, please stay involved. Please go to our webpage so you can see where I post everything about this project that we've done up to this point. Once again, send us an email or leave us a voicemail. And just to let you know that we do have an online survey that runs through August, where we would love to get your feedback on these draft roadway concepts that we're sharing with you today. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Knowles.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks everybody for being here. I've got some tutorials to walk through very quickly about how to use Zoom, our online conferencing software, along with Poll Everywhere. And of course, our preference would be to be with you in person, have these plans out, printed out in large formats so that you could see them, mark them up, and give us feedback that way. But with COVID, we wanted to be safe, and so online format is the best, safest way that we can do that and still engage with you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for setting aside a little bit of your Saturday afternoon to talk with us. There are multiple ways to interact through Zoom. At any time, starting now, you can ask questions in the Q&A window that's available at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see that Q&A button, just scroll down with your mouse and it should appear. You can also raise your hand to speak during our Q&A sessions. And so that button will appear at that time when we go live. And that's an opportunity for you to ask a question or provide your feedback using your voice. And so there's 2 ways that you can engage with us during this workshop. The meeting is being recorded, and as Carol said, it'll be posted online soon after the conclusion of this meeting. Those are those buttons, what they look like, the raise hand button and the Q&A button. Our panelists here are joined with me, city staff and Alta staff, will be answering some of those typed questions during the workshop, and then we have some that we'll leave for those Q&A sessions. We're also collecting information using Poll Everywhere. It's a software that we're using to just get the sense of the group. And so it's really effective for us, for you to engage that way. So please open up a web browser at this point. and type in polev.com/altaplanning107. And Ben's going to send that out in the chat window as well, so you can click on that. It's polev.com/altaplanning107. I'll mention that sometimes there's a compatibility issue with Internet Explorer. And so if it's possible, please use a different browser like Edge or Chrome or Firefox. Alternatively, you can also use your cell phone and text the word altaplanning107. That's all one word, ALTAPLANNING 107 to the number 22333. Once you go to polev.com/altaplanning107, if it's your first time using Poll Everywhere, you'll be prompted to create a screen name like your first name and your last initial. You can also skip this step if you choose. You will then be taken to a landing page. This page will be updated with polls throughout the presentation. You don't need to navigate anywhere else. As I scroll through the presentation, new polls will populate and become active. So once you're there, it'll be multiple choice, maybe some open-ended questions which you can type in. If at any time you navigate away from the polls page, you can either hit the home button and enter in our code for this workshop, altaplanning107, in the username field, or just simply re-enter the URL at the top, and it'll come back right where we are. You don't need to go back or forth. It'll be right where we are in the presentation. So let's get started. Let's do a test. So are you able to access Poll Everywhere? Again, go to polev.com/altaplanning107 or text the word altaplanning107 to the number 22333. And if you're having issues, we're going to go into a Q&A in just a second and help you sort through any issues you might be having. All right, 2 folks have answered the poll so far. Three folks. I see 11 folks have joined us for this workshop this afternoon. So I'd like to see if a few more people can access polev.com/altaplanning107. If you're having issues accessing it, we'll get to that in a second, hopefully get through that. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. We're going to work through this. We got a fair number of people, 8 people not able to participate with this. Okay, where do you live? We're interested in getting as much input as we can from people that live near this corridor or further away. So let us know, do you live on or within a few blocks of Pruneridge, a different area within Santa Clara, in a neighboring city, or somewhere else? So we'll leave this poll open for a second. So on or within a few blocks, within the city, but different neighborhood, adjoining cities, or somewhere else. Okay, great. We got 5 results so far. That's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. We've got 3 more poll questions, and then we're going to take a break and go into the Q&A for technical questions. So we are trying to do our best to make sure as many people know about this study and get engaged with us. So we want to know, how did you hear about this afternoon's meeting? Did you receive a postcard in the mail? We sent out 7,700 postcards to everybody that had an address within a half a mile of the corridor. The city put it on the city's website, pushed it out through social media channels like Nextdoor, Facebook. Also, the City of Santa Clara email. There was an article in the city manager's blog post, or other method. Maybe you heard it from a neighbor, word of mouth. somebody else's social media accounts. So let us know how you heard about this afternoon's meeting. Great, wonderful. Okay, Ben, if you could go to the next poll. And we also have 2 questions. We're trying to make sure that we do a good job getting a representation, a full representation of city residents. And so we're going to ask some demographic questions. We're going to ask about the gender makeup of the attendees today, along with your race and ethnic identity. So let's go with gender first. Ben, if you could turn that poll on. Okay, thank you. And the next one, Ben. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for answering those questions. That's just helpful for us as we work on improving the outreach and notification about public workshops. We do want as many people to be involved, engaged, and providing feedback as we can. So let's pause here. I want to answer any questions you have about using Zoom or using Poll Everywhere at this point. And then we're going to go through the content and we'll have another Q&A session about the concepts. So for anybody that's interested in engaging with us on Poll Everywhere that's having issues or having issues with their Zoom account, please let us know. Right now, you can type those questions into the Q&A box, or at this point, my colleague John is going to make it available for you to raise your hand. So again, if you go to the bottom of the screen, there should be a participants or raise hand button. And at that point, you can raise your hand and we'll talk it through real quick. We'll do a quick Q&A session around technology issues. Okay. I don't see any hands raised, and I don't see any Q&A in the window. So I'll give folks just a second more, and then we'll move on. All right, well, thanks everybody. We'll move on to the next portion of our presentation. So I want to provide a quick project overview and updates since our last round of public engagement. Folks have asked, why study Pruneridge Avenue? What's this project all about? Improvements for Pruneridge Avenue were included as recommendations in the city's general plan. It's also a high priority corridor in both the city and the county's bicycle plans. Changes to Pruneridge Avenue help implement the city's complete streets policy, which is 18-8593, if you're interested in looking that up. The city has adopted a policy to try and improve streets in the city to make them accommodate as many different user groups as possible, whether you're driving, taking transit, walking, using a stroller, a wheelchair, or bicycling. It helps achieve the goals of the city's climate action plan by increasing the ability for more people to walk or bicycle for transportation and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that the city produces through transportation. It's also an opportunity to enhance safety and comfort for all roadway users, whether it's residents getting in and out of driveways, or people that bicycle today, or people that would like to bicycle but don't feel comfortable sharing the road with vehicles, along with residents or people in the neighborhood trying to cross Pruneridge Avenue. This study is looking particularly at a 3-mile section of Pruneridge that goes from Winchester Boulevard, which is your city boundary with San Jose, all the way across to Pomeroy Avenue, which is just shy of your border with Cupertino and Apple Campus. Pruneridge, as you know, is a minor arterial. It's a posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour. The city obtained a grant from Caltrans to study this section of Pruneridge to better understand the potential benefits and any trade-offs involved with creating a complete street on Pruneridge that better serves people who want to walk and bike more often. In our last round of community workshops, we asked folks what the priorities should be on Pruneridge, and these are ranked from most important to least important. The number one thing that we heard from folks is just calming or slowing down the traffic speeds on Pruneridge. It's posted 35 miles per hour, but we heard a lot of anecdotal stories about vehicles just being able to go much faster than that. People want to see a reduction in traffic congestion, improved bicycle options, walking conditions, and the preservation of on-street parking. Those are the top 5. We also asked people to give us some words, 1, 2, or 3 words that come to mind to think about their vision for the future of Pruneridge. This is a great opportunity to think through what Pruneridge is today and what it could be in the future for coming generations. And so this is a great exercise. We got a lot of good information. This is a word cloud. The larger the word, the more prevalent it was in responses that we received. The top 5 themes that came out of this exercise were that people wanted to see more bike lanes and bike safety. A lot of people wanted to leave the road as is. There was interest in traffic calming, overall safety and pedestrian issues, and preserving the residential character at our first workshop. And then we had a Saturday workshop just like today, back in February. Traffic calming, parking, and bike lane safety came up as the top 3 themes in that meeting. Engagement to date, as I mentioned, 7,700 postcards went out to residents in the first workshop round, and they went out again a few weeks ago. We had 120 people attend our first rounds of workshops, and I'm happy to say we had 59 people at the maximum during our attendance on Thursday night. And so we're excited to have you here with us now. Survey responses, we've already received 738 responses to our survey. We've received 27 voicemail messages, 68 emails, and we've also had 5 focus group meetings that include meetings with the City of Cupertino, City of San Jose, Cupertino Union and Santa Clara Union School District staff, the Santa Clara Public Health Department, Apple, the Corey and Forest Pruneridge, and Old Quad neighborhood associations. So at this point, I want to turn things over to my colleague, Ryan Booth, who is an associate designer at Alta, and he helped put together these ideas, these future visions and concepts for what Pruneridge could look like. So go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks again for everybody for taking time out of their Saturday to join us. Go through these concept designs here. The following images are the same designs that are posted on the website. We've removed the text here for clarity, but all the same details are available on the project website, along with the concept design survey, which is a second survey to what Jeff mentioned there, specifically for these concept designs. We have 4 concepts to present today, including this no build option, which represents the existing conditions as Pruneridge is today. What we're showing here is an illustration that represents the majority of the existing condition, but does not tackle or represent any one specific intersection, stretch, or driveway. This is just a tool for us to help vision what's possible along Pruneridge Avenue. So again, what you see here on the screen is Pruneridge Ave as it exists from Pomeroy to Winchester. For the most of it, we are aware that it does take some different forms, especially as you get towards San Tomas and Saratoga. But overall, and what we've heard people concerned about mostly is things like maintaining or enhancing the residential context. The majority of the Pruneridge corridor is aligned with single-family homes that define this area's residential character. Parking lanes exist as they exist now on either side of the street. We've got 4 lanes of vehicle traffic, 2 in each direction. Right now, all the intersections and corners are sweeping and long crossing distances for sidewalk users. The size of the corners are directly linked to the speed at which vehicles feel comfortable handling those turns. So in general, wider corners, sweeping turns enable faster speeds. The intersection and corner design that's on Pruneridge right now are based on old design standards and would not be compatible with today's design standards. Another important thing to point out that is outside of the roadway are the canopy trees that line Pruneridge Ave. They're intermittent mature trees that are spread along the corridor and provide shade where they're present. However, most trees are on private property, set pretty far back from the roadway, and don't provide a lot of shade or enclosure that results in pedestrian comfort and enhanced residential character. So again, this is the example of what Pruneridge is today, existing conditions. It also represents the no build option that we're presenting here today. Next slide, please. So diving into some changes that we are proposing. One of these here is to maintain 4 travel lanes. And like Jeff said, in order to accomplish the goals set out by the Pruneridge Bicycle Master Plan, putting in what's a buffered bike lane. So that's a bike lane with an extra bit of buffer to separate the cyclists from traffic, as you can see here. Just to reiterate, this illustration is not of any one specific intersection, but represents what's possible along Pruneridge. Like I said, 4 lanes of travel, narrower lanes to fit the 4 vehicular lanes, but also to promote some traffic calming or reduction in how fast people can feel they can go along the corridor. Moving towards the intersection here, you'll see curb extensions and high visibility crosswalks. What we've shown here is what we call a quick build option. So paint, symbols, markings, and some vertical bollards. These are quick build, low cost compared to more heavy interventions like concrete and moving curbs and things like that. One of the many advantages to the quick build is you can have some big impacts to improving safety along the corridor in a relatively quick fashion. It also allows the community to test out design options, see what works for them, see what doesn't, and then in the future, if there's a desire to make these permanent, the city can go after funding and make some permanent changes. But these painted options are great ways to introduce the community to some of these improvements. And what you see here are high visibility crosswalks, curb bulb outs in blue there, representing areas to shorten the actual length pedestrian needs to cross the street, and also promote those lower turn speeds and reduce the kind of cross-cut turns that vehicles are able to make today. What you'll also notice is as the cyclist approaches the intersection with that green-backed bike symbol there, they get a little protection from a right turning vehicle, and it increases the visibility of the cyclist. So a benefit for everyone that's on the roadway there. And lastly, I'll point out the light green trees. What we're showing here is the possibility that trees can be added along the corridor to fill in some of the gaps. These trees that we're showing here today are within the public right of way, but because of the constrained curb to curb width that we're dealing with would be on the outside of the sidewalk. Again, outside of the sidewalk, there's a little bit of public right of way. That's where we're proposing these trees to be added. All right, next slide. All right, so for concept 2, a lot of the same things from the first concept. What you'll see, I'll point out some of the differences here. What we're showing here are 2 vehicle lanes in each direction with a center turning lane. Again, enhancing the traffic calming with some narrower lanes, placing a buffered bike lane on either side. And then by going with the 2 vehicle lanes with a turning lane, we're able to keep and maintain that parking on either side of the street, just as it is today. Same thing at the intersections with the curb extensions and the bollards, a little bit different configuration because there's a little bit more room, but again, enhanced pedestrian safety with shorter crossing distances and higher visibility. Another thing you'll notice here is that that center turn lane becomes a dedicated turn lane at the intersections. The idea there is to keep the ease and traffic moving at the intersections with the dedicated turn lane. All right. one more concept to go through here. Again, I'm going through this kind of fast. We're going to recap all of this and you'll have some opportunity to give some feedback in a moment. All right, so concept 3, parking protection option. Again, very similar to the previous option with a center turn lane and 2 vehicle lanes in either direction. This option introduces the buffered bike lane on the curbside with the parking in the middle. And so that configuration, what that does is that it separates the cyclist even more from traffic and allows that parking space to act as a protected buffer between moving vehicles and cyclists, and also provides a separation and added comfort for pedestrians along the sidewalk. What you have today, as you see here, is about a 5-foot sidewalk, and adding separation really enhances and makes it more comfortable and convenient for the pedestrian. One consideration that we'll have to think about here is sight distances as people pull out of the driveways. It's a big concern we've heard from the past public meetings. And so we've introduced some buffer space to pull any parked vehicles away from the driveways to allow people entering and exiting more view shed. So as you're pulling out, you get a longer view down the corridor. You can see cyclists, you can see oncoming traffic, and allows you to gauge those distances a little bit better. At the corners, again, very similar to the previous one, the configuration with the bike lane and the corners is a little bit different. You've got the bike lane going through, again, protected from those right turning vehicles, added visibility, but yields to pedestrians crossing in those areas. One consideration that for any of these options with the bike lane will be how to coordinate other kind of public services like trash pickup and delivery. These things are, and things like maybe future transit lines, things like that. All of these are compatible with those uses and have been figured out and implemented in many situations. So many times it's about coordinating those design pieces into the design. All right, I know that was quick, but we're going to recap here. It's an opportunity to give some feedback. And again, all of these design options are going to be are currently on the project website with accompanying text and a survey that allows you to let us know your feedback. Let us know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and we're going to jump into some polling right now. So get ready with your poll EV. So concept 1 shows the 4 lanes with the buffered bike lane. And again, in order to accommodate all those things, we have to drop a parking lane along one side. So go ahead and poll EV and let us know, is this a concept you fully support with minor changes, need major changes to get my support, or you don't support this concept at all. Give folks a few minutes here to chime in. And just a reminder here, the website, the project website is available to go to. We've got a general survey about the corridor. We've got a specific survey about these concept designs. And we've also have other documents and pieces for you to view as the project gets updated. All right, just a couple more seconds. All right, here we go. Option 2, again, just a reminder, this is an option that has 2 vehicle lanes, 1 in each direction with a center turn lane. Incorporates the buffered bike lanes and maintains parking on either side of the street. All right, again, for everybody, we're doing these polls on the Poll Everywhere website. You can see that on the top of the poll here, pollev.com, Altiplaning 107. You can also do it by phone. Send Altiplaning 107 to number 22333 and follow the instructions. All right, so one more here. All right, so the parking protected option, again, just as a reminder, this is very similar to the previous one, but moves the buffered bike lanes to the outside with parking on either side of the street, but towards the inside. And what that does, again, is it provides a little bit more separation for the cyclists and maintains the parking levels that there are out there today. Okay, looks like we've got there. So there's another option on the Pole EV, just kind of open-ended. What additional information do you need to provide your opinion today? Is there something that you'd like to explain more? Is there something you'd like to share with us? We are going to have a Q&A to answer some live questions, and we're going to open up the Q&A that you can type questions in that we'll answer here as well. Just while you're thinking, I'll remind everyone, we're going to follow up these concepts with some pedestrian specific improvements that we've noticed could be used along the corridor. Again, we haven't looked at any specific location, but we have looked at the corridor as a whole and have highlighted some pieces that can be implemented to improve pedestrian safety specifically. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jeff, my colleague, and you can run through some of the pedestrian improvement tools that we talked about.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And we're going to leave this poll live for a few more minutes. If you've got information that you're typing in, keep going with it for a few more minutes. I'm going to move over to talk about pedestrian improvements. All right, here we go. So in addition to the bicycle, traffic, parking, and intersection treatments that Ryan described, we also looked at potential tools for improving the experience of people walking at intersections. I'm going to go through 9 different pedestrian crossing improvements. These come from the city's pedestrian master plan. And so it's just kind of reintroducing these concepts and then talking about what combination works well for signalized intersections and then unsignalized intersections. So at our disposal, the city could install pedestrian crossing signs, alerting motorists to the presence of marked crosswalks, high visibility crosswalk markings. These sometimes are called zebra stripes, piano keys. It's additional contrast in the color of the pavement to, again, let people know who are driving that this marking, this area is for pedestrians that might be entering the roadway. It helps increase yielding behavior and deters motorists encroaching on that pedestrian space. Additionally, advanced yield and stop lines could be installed. These inform motorists of the correct position to wait for pedestrians at marked crossings. They're used in advance of stop signs or signal crossings and also help promote visibility, especially on these multi-lane arterial streets like Pruneridge. It's important to make sure that all vehicles can see clearly pedestrians in the crosswalk and that vehicles aren't blocking the visibility of each other. Curb ramps provide a transition between the sidewalk and the roadway crossings, provide universal access for all users, including pedestrians using wheeled mobility devices like wheelchairs, small children, adults pushing strollers, and people with luggage. A curb extension of the sidewalk and curb at the corners of intersections. Typically, these are the width of the parking lane, 7 to 8 feet. That's how you shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians that Ryan was mentioning in those designs. They shorten the roadway crossing, make pedestrians more visible to motorists, and safer to cross. At some locations, we could look at improving the right turn slip lanes. I think most clearly at San Tomas Expressway in Saratoga. This would involve shortening the turning radius or the corners and requiring vehicles to turn more slowly instead of treating it like a highway off-ramp. Doing this helps improve the safety of pedestrians that need to cross that right turn slip lane that most part do not have a signal or not signal controlled or just yield controlled. And it's all about creating more visibility between the motorists and the pedestrians waiting to or entering the crosswalk. There's also some things we can do with signals and beacons. So we can install countdown timers and accessible pedestrian signals, also known as APS. Countdown timers indicate pedestrian walk phase and the remaining time that pedestrians have to cross at those signalized intersections. The APS devices communicate information about walk or don't walk using non-visual formats. So it's usually a pre-recorded voice letting people know it's safe to cross or it's time to cross, countdown information, or sometimes you hear chirping so that visually impaired pedestrians know how to get across the street. Leading pedestrian interval typically gives pedestrians a 3 to 7 second head start. So you can see in this image, the red light, the signal is red for vehicles, and the walk sign is on for pedestrians. So they can establish themselves in the crosswalk, increasing visibility and motorist yielding to them. And lastly, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon is user activated. It's a pedestrian beacon. It's only activated when a pedestrian is present at the crosswalk. They use high intensity LED lights that alert motorists to the presence of pedestrians in the crosswalk and also increase yielding behaviors. These are really good at uncontrolled locations where there's not a stop sign, there's not a signal, but pedestrians need to get across. So as I mentioned, there could be a combination of all of these pulled together. At signalized intersections, it could include changing the slip lane design where those are present, installing the countdown timers with APS, leading pedestrian intervals, new curb ramps, signage, and crosswalk markings. At those unsignalized locations, curb extensions or rapid flashing beacons, ramps, signage, and pavement markings also could be installed. So we want to know from you, what additional information do you need to provide opinions about pedestrian improvements at crossings? If you have other ideas or other technology that you've seen work well in Santa Clara, neighboring areas, or anywhere you've been, let us know and we can think about that, incorporate that into our revised designs. So again, we'll leave this open for a few folks that are providing that information to us. So Ben will leave this open if you're still typing away, but I'm going to move on to our Q&A session. So this is really where we want to get your feedback. So thank you to everybody that's been using the Q&A function, typing in your answers and questions. But at this point, John is also going to turn on the raise hand function, and we're going to let folks a chance to ask a question or provide their feedback.
And Jeff, if you can start with one of the questions that are typed, it's probably easy to answer.
Got it. Okay. Let me open that up.
The question was from Ari, and the question is, how safe is option 3 in regards to the potential conflict between people pulling out of driveways and the cyclists? So this is for the parking protection option. And the second part of the question, in addition to the visibility between driveway interactions and the bicycle lane, is if there are any real life examples of the setups, and how safe were they?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. And thanks, Ari, for typing that in for us. So I'll go first, and then I've got Carol coming back with us to answer some of these questions. So go ahead, and if you're waiting in line, raise your hand, and we'll organize that in a second. So the safety about the option 3, and I'm going to go scroll back to that so people remind themselves of these different concepts. Oops, not too far. There we go. So the question was really about driveway interactions with the bicyclists. And so Ryan talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to show you a little more and zoom in here. So it is something to be concerned about. Drivers in residential driveways backing out and crossing the bicycle lane as they're looking for cars. It is something that we look at. There are some benefits, however, of having the bicycle lanes on each side of the crosswalk. Bicyclists are only moving in one direction, so the driver only needs to look for one. Drivers today are already crossing the sidewalk as they back out of their driveways, and so they know to look for pedestrians in both directions, and so it's adding an additional roadway user to look out for. We've enhanced this by also looking at peeling back the parking, as Ryan mentioned. And so half car length, maybe a full car length of prohibited parking at those driveways allows for increased visibility. The other thing to make note of is that residential drivers will learn the right behaviors about looking for bicyclists, where if it was a commercial driveway or like a gas station, for instance, you might have a lot of new drivers to the area that are not accustomed to crossing this new type of bike facility. And so they don't know to look more closely for bicyclists. And so the benefit of having mostly residential driveways is that those drivers are going to learn pretty quickly how to navigate this in a safe fashion. There are real world examples of this concept built. This is relatively new type of classification in California, but there are good examples in the Bay Area of this being done. San Jose has done a lot of new protected bikeways, separated bikeways. The city of Oakland is doing these. City of Fremont is incorporating these designs. The benefit of this versus just the buffered bike lane is that more people, children, seniors, novice bicyclists, even as adults, feel more comfortable with just that added separation from vehicles, moving vehicles. And that parking lane does that. It makes it more attractive and more comfortable, so we get more of these bicyclists out there on the roads. And we know that increased numbers also means increased safety for everyone. So I can answer more, Ari, if you've got questions, but that's what we've gotten. Carol, is there anything else you wanted to add to that question?
Yeah, actually, when I was doing my own research on protected bike lanes, I came across an article actually that was done in 2010, which they had reported that these protected bike lanes, that there's a 28% lower injury rate than just on-street bike facilities. So as Jeff said, we do see a lower injury rate with these type of bike lanes. And then on top of that, as Jeff said, seniors and people that are very new to biking feel a lot more comfortable because they do have that separation from vehicles.
Great. Anybody else on the project team want to provide a response?
Yeah, Jeff, just not to pile on here, but one, I think, important point to note for drivers is if you're pulling out of your driveway, this actually allows you to notice one type of user at a time. So pull out of your driveway, you can look for cyclists, and then you pull out more, and then you look for a car. That way, as opposed to the previous option, or if it's just standard bike lanes, when you're ready to pull out, so this is a great example. If you're pulling out of your driveway and you're ready to pull out and you see a gap in the vehicles, you press the accelerator, but you're also having to cross the bike lane as well. So there's a potential conflict zone. Whereas option 3, if you scroll back to option 3, by the time you're ready to pull into traffic, you've already cleared the bike lane. You've pulled out slowly of your driveway and you're ready to pull into traffic, and that's it. You don't have to cross another bike lane to get into traffic and up to vehicle speed. I just thought that was an important consideration to point out.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Carol. All right, we've got some folks with us here. We got their hands raised. Hopefully it's not getting too tired for having your hand raised so long. Revati, I hope I said that right. Let me go ahead and unmute you. I think John might need to do that. And go ahead with your comment or question.
Oh, hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so thank you so much for having this meeting. These are all some wonderful options that you have right now. One thing I was wondering was that Pruneridge has a lot of crosswalks right now, like outside the swimming pool and outside Redwood Avenue, quite a few crosswalks actually. And currently the people taking those crosswalks have to cross like multiple lanes of traffic. They have to like cross the eastbound and the westbound lane. I was wondering that if we like choose option 2 or 3 and we are creating a turning lane in the middle, would it be possible to maybe like put a pedestrian island or something in the turning lane so that pedestrians will only have to cross one direction of traffic at a time?
Carol, you want to start off?
Sure. Yes. Well, we'll definitely take a look at where are the locations that we can best do pedestrian improvements. We'd actually have to do a traffic study to see what is the best type of improvement we can do that Jeff shown to us today in this presentation. And it is good to point out that when we do go to option 2 or 3, that you will have a reduction, right, in travel lanes. So your crossing distance will be much shorter than having to cross 4 lanes of traffic. So now you'll have to do 3, but we'll definitely take a look once we collect all the data to see what type of improvements are best designed at these intersections.
That's a great question, something that we've definitely considered, something that could be looked at in the next rounds of revision of this design. But thanks for that comment, appreciate that. Randall, you're up. Go ahead with your comment or question.
Yeah, as far as, these sort of non-traditional arrangements, like having the parking inside the bike lane and things like that, the kind of the assumption is all this stuff is going to be freshly painted and it isn't going to be raining and stuff like that. But the reality is that cities don't maintain, the paint and it gets hard to see and it rains, and sometimes, when it rains, the lines of the pavement disappear. So one thing that I have to say is your design should consider, that sort of thing and sort of keep in mind, that Santa Clara may not paint this or repaint these things all the time.
Great, that's a great comment, and I can start, and then Carol, you can answer this. I think this is a great opportunity with the revisioning this. If there is new opportunity to repaint the lines to make sure that they're retro reflective, so at night or in those rain conditions, they are reflecting back. And I know exactly what you mean where I live as well. When I'm driving in light conditions where you don't have that reflectivity or they're really old paint, it gets pretty dangerous. And so this is a great opportunity to kind of refresh that. Carol, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, and especially if the city ever does get funding for design and construction, we definitely would be repaving these roadways and putting fresh paint in. And we do have a pavement program where we do determine which streets need to be repaved at what time. And we do consider, the bike lanes at that time as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for the comment. Thanks for the question. All right, Jonathan, let's go over to the Q&A box here. So we've got a question from Ben. Ben says, would the proposed bike pedestrian lanes include any usage limitations? For example, would other modes of transportation such as skateboards, electric scooters, wheelchairs, etc. be allowed? If so, how would this be monitored or enforced? I think it's a great question. The bicycle lane is maybe becoming a little bit of a misnomer because it's really more of an active transportation lane, kind of a medium speed lane. You've got your slower speeds for people on the sidewalk. If you're using a maybe manual powered wheelchair, kids walking, adults walking. Then you have your bicycle lane that can accommodate people on skateboards, people on electric scooters or scooters, and bikes and e-bikes. That's where that would go. And of course, you have your traffic lane for powered vehicles, your cars. So there wouldn't be any limitation beyond what's required in this, the California Vehicle Code, which sets certain standards about the speeds of people in bicycle lanes. And typically that's tied to the type of motor that's involved. You can use an electric motor up to 20 miles per hour. And I think Ben Fraser is on my staff and he knows a lot more about the restrictions there, but there wouldn't be any sort of limitations in our design and our concept here. Any other comments? Okay, I got another follow-up from Ben. Thanks, Ben. Would the proposed bike and pedestrian other modes of transportation be one way only? If so, how will that be enforced to avoid accidents and collisions. So yes, the bicycle lanes, just as they are in all these considerations, would be one way only. And so that would be enforced just how typical bicycle riding is enforced to the city through the police department, ticketing or citing people who are biking the wrong way. What we see when people are biking the wrong way, when they're asked why they're doing this, it's because there's not enough safe and comfortable crossings for them to get on the right side of the road. And so what we've noticed about Pruneridge is that there aren't that many crossings, especially from Saratoga to Winchester, where people can cross. They have to go quite a ways out of their way to find the next signal where they can cross safely. And so we hope with some of these interventions that are part of this concept, this package, bicyclists will be doing the correct thing of biking on the right side of the street. But it's a good question, something that will have to be worked with in tandem with other departments within the city. Carol, anything else you want to add to that one?
No, I think you got that one.
Okay, great questions. Really appreciate the feedback and thoughts that folks are providing. I don't see any more hands raised, but feel free, again, raise your hand. It's the bottom of your screen. If you don't see that, just scroll your mouse down and you can click raise hand. We'd love to talk with you, hear what you have to say. Jonathan, any other questions in the Q&A box that we should take?
There are no other questions.
Folks, I'm going to just talk about some next steps real quickly, but we'll stick around. The staff will stick around if you are still formulating your question or still thinking and ruminating. We'll stick around for a few more minutes, but I just want to share where we're headed. So in the short term, as part of this project, the staff will complete technical analysis. We'll be looking at parking utilization. We'll be looking at traffic congestion and speeds. We'll be looking at modeling all of this. We'll be looking at improvements and connectivity that the bike facilities could provide. We'll be sharing, we'll also be developing, cost estimates and then sharing those refined concepts based off the input that we've heard this afternoon, that we heard on Thursday night, that we were collecting from all of the survey information. We're going to share that with the public again and with City Council. And in the long term, this will be a decision for City Council. If they want to move forward, the city will then have the obligation to go out and find additional funding for the design and then the construction phase. So we're relatively, in the middle phase of this work. We still have much more work to do to develop and refine these concepts, collect information about the benefits and the trade-offs, and then share that with the community at our next round, our third round of public workshops, which will happen about a year from now. There'll be a public draft plan for your review, and then City Council in the summer. So we really, really do want to stay involved with you and you involved with us. So take the survey, send us an email, leave us a voicemail message. We're collecting and reviewing those every week, and attend any future community meetings. So if folks would like to stick around, ask more questions, we'll be here. If folks want to get on with their Saturday afternoon, I understand and appreciate you taking the time just to be with us. So thanks, everybody. We're going to stick around a few more minutes. So if you want to raise your hand, feel free. If you want to sign off and enjoy your Saturday, please feel free to do so. Help us get the word out. Last thing I'll say is help us get the word out. Tell your friends, neighbors, coworkers, everybody who has an interest in this corridor. We'd love to get the feedback and those ideas.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon.
Carol, do you want to take a question? I see a question from Frank here. Frank says, will the traffic study only be using numbers collected during the pandemic, or are we looking at numbers before 2020?
Actually, Frank, we actually have counts that the city has collected before the pandemic. But then also what we did is we took counts at our study intersections. I think we have a little over 20, which we're looking at intersections along Pruneridge, along the study corridor, and along adjacent parallel streets. So we did take traffic counts during the pandemic, but then we used a growth factor that we developed from the older counts to get these pre-pandemic traffic volumes to volumes that you would normally see pre-pandemic. So it was a little bit of a mixture between old counts before the pandemic, and then we took newer counts, but we factored them such that they would match more pre-pandemic numbers. And so those counts will be used to do a traffic study, and we'll bring the results of the traffic analysis for each of the concepts at the next round of community workshops.
And Frank, you might be asking, what are these pre-pandemic counts? Are they from like the early 1990s? No, we got some from 2018 and 2019. So relatively recent that we're, as Carol mentioned, we're calibrating them together. We'll also be forecasting in the future based off of the general plan's estimation growth in population for the city as well. So a great question, something that we're looking at really closely. The other thing that came up on Thursday night, people asked, well, are you just looking at counts along Pruneridge? What about the neighboring streets nearby? And the answer is yes, we're taking counts at over 20 different locations, not only just along Pruneridge, but also in the neighboring streets. And so modeling any sort of spillover effect that may or may not happen. Great question. Thanks, Frank.
And Jeff, I think
Go
Frank
ahead,
has his hand raised. So maybe if you wanted to unmute him, if you wanted to maybe follow up on that, or
yeah, Frank, go ahead. Now you're able to talk. Frank, are you able? Let me just see if that works.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi. So yeah, follow-up question, and I'm not sure if it was asked at your last meeting. And this is a concern that I have that ties into the traffic that could go on to other streets if option 3 or 4 are integrated. Have you guys done any mitigation factors to all of the traffic that comes down Pruneridge now that's heading to the Apple campus that is then going to take side streets to get to Apple because they're not going to want to change their driving habits, like say going to Mauritia or going to Woodham's or any of the through streets that are maybe further up than where other people in the city of Santa Clara live. Because I'm very concerned that pushing this down to a 1 lane in each way is not going to solve the problem of the traffic. It's only going to push people down through fares that already have issues.
Great. Thanks, Frank. A good question. It did come up on Thursday as well. And I think that's why I was mentioning just looking into the neighborhood as well. A couple of things I think I can just point out. One is that when we looked at this idea of consolidating travel lanes from 4 down to 2, essentially with a center turn lane, is that it's based off of a lot of national research about roads that, when they were originally designed to accommodate the volumes, the numbers of traffic that can flow on the street. And what we've seen is that streets that operate on 1 lane in each direction with that center turn lane, if they're operating at less than 20,000 vehicles per day, then coming down and consolidating has a very limited effect on the congestion, because that center turn lane, what that does is that any car that needs to turn already just starts to automatically block traffic behind it. And that traffic then has to decide whether it's going to divert around that car that's turning left across traffic into the travel lane. And so de facto, it kind of creates a road diet condition. Pruneridge Avenue has around 14,000 vehicles per day. So it's below that threshold. That's not good enough for us. We're looking at modeling it robustly at all the different intersections, signalized intersections along the corridor to really look and see what this impact would be. So we will be looking at that. If there is any spillover effect, that's something that could also be continued to be monitored. And there's good traffic calming tools that the city could consider for making it so that those side streets don't become the shortcuts around Pruneridge. And so that's something that could continue to be looked at as part of this process and beyond. But good points. Thank you very much for your comments, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, and Frank, just to follow up, we are, once again, we are looking at the intersection surrounding Pruneridge on parallel corridors, and we are doing simulation modeling and traffic analysis. So at the next round of workshops, we will bring those results to you so you can see what possible traffic impacts could occur at these parallel roadways.
Great. Thanks, Frank. Okay, George, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, George, with your question or comment.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks.
Great. You may have discussed this. I'm sorry, I forgot to log in on time. But last time I asked a question about what was being done to consider the impact that Stevens Creek not having lights synchronized was having on us. I understand that this project is not specifically dealing with Stevens Creek Boulevard, but it has, over the last several years, it's started taking me twice as long to go from Cronin down to Blaney than it did before. Part of that is the way the lights are synchronized or unsynchronized. Has Santa Clara been interested at all in working with Cupertino, San Jose, and the county to synchronize lights on Stevens Creek Boulevard? Because that would take a lot of traffic off of side streets like Pruneridge.
Thanks, George.
Jeff, I'll start and then maybe I'll ask Jonathan Yee, our traffic manager, to kind of chime in a little bit. But George, just to let you know that some of the signals along Stevens Creek are maintained by the city of San Jose. So it's a shared roadway between city of San Jose, Santa Clara, and parts of Cupertino. So it's a shared roadway. So some signals are operated by San Jose, some signals are operated by Santa Clara, and I believe some are operated by Cupertino. And I'm going to see if Jonathan can answer a little bit about synchronization would be great.
Sure, thanks, Carol. I can definitely directly answer that. So thanks for the question. The city of Santa Clara, right now, the signals that the city operates and maintains, it is generally from just west of 280 over to about San Tomas. That's generally about the limits of Stevens Creek. That is under the control of Santa Clara. And the city does have a project to resynchronize those lights. We'll be collecting data similar to this process, trying to estimate if COVID never occurred, so some future traffic levels, and we will be resynchronizing the lights on Stevens Creek, and that's between 280 over to Saratoga. And as Carol had mentioned, west of that area, it is entirely in the city of Cupertino, and east of that area, it is entirely in the city of San Jose. But we'll definitely be, as part of our project, looking at those timings to ensure that our segment is doing our best to synchronize between those three groups. It's fairly complicated, but I just wanted to say that we do have a project to resynchronize the lights there, and I believe that will help part of the section you had described, which was a little bit west of Cronin there.
Great, and I think George just sent a follow-up, Jonathan, in the Q&A box. Just wanted to make sure that, as you mentioned, coordination with Cupertino, San Jose, and the county is something that you're working towards. All right, thanks. Go ahead, Jonathan, if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as part of our project, we're going to be looking at the timings with Cupertino and San Jose to try to make sure our timings fit those programs.
Great, thanks. All right, Adam Prince. Adam, you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, I have a question about the traffic analysis. Will it include looking at traffic during the rush hour peaks in the morning and evening. Currently, or at least pre-COVID, it was very difficult to travel on Pruneridge in the mornings and evening. It would back up pretty severely. And if we reduce down to 1 lanes in each direction, I'm worried about the impact and, of course, spill over onto all the other streets.
A great question, fair question for sure. And yes, we are looking at those peak periods in the morning and PM rush periods, and then the non-peak periods. And then we're, as I mentioned, modeling that off of kind of current information, pre-COVID, and then also projected growth in the city. So looking out even into like the year 2040, what that could do on this quarter. So yep, all of that will be taken together as data points for City Council to help make a decision about those benefits, and then any of those trade-offs that be required. So yeah, thank you. All right. Carol, Jonathan, anybody else wanted to respond to Adam's question?
No, I think you covered that in terms of definitely we'll be looking at those weekday peak periods.
Okay, I've got a question here from Ben in the chat box. Does the general plan anticipate an increase in residential density between Pruneridge and Stevens Creek?
As far as I know, I don't believe that it is going to increase in residential density. Our planning department is the ones that normally plan these, the land uses. And we also generally have specific plans going on, where we are looking at, increasing density, whether it's residential, commercial. So we have like our El Camino specific plan area, our downtown area, our Freedom Circle, and Patrick Henry specific plans. And those are like the areas where the city is currently focusing on increasing density in the city. And I also, unfortunately, can't speak for the city of San Jose, since they share the roadway of Stevens Creek with us. So San Jose could be potentially looking to increase density near Stevens Creek. But for now, the city is currently focusing on, those 4 areas that I just talked about.
Ben, it's a good question, something we can look at even more. But I think Carol's right from what our work was with looking at the bicycle and pedestrian master planning processes citywide. This was not at that time a focus for increased density, like focused density creation. So I think part of that also is thinking about Apple's growth at all as a major employment hub on this corridor. And I know in Cupertino, they've got some restrictions about additional trips that could be taken, and they're working actively to try and promote more non-auto trips. And so this, providing a bicycle facility is one of those measures that might get people out of their cars and bicycling instead of adding to the congestion. But great point, something that I think we can continue to look at as part of this process.
Just to add on that, Jeff, I was just double checking the general plan itself, just to confirm my answer. And yeah, there isn't any specific change in the land use. So the residential densities would be very similar. They're not changing according to the general plan.
Great, thanks, Jonathan, for pulling that up so quickly. Well, it's certainly a smaller group. We're up to 14 attendees now. I think that's kind of where we have been at the peak for this afternoon, but it's been a great, robust discussion. Really great to hear from everybody. A lot of concerns raised that we need to look at, and I'm sure council will share those and ask us those questions as well. So we'll be working in the next couple months to do as best as we can to answer these questions and bring that back in our 3rd round of workshops. I don't see any additional questions in the Q&A window, and I don't see anybody. Oh, George has got a hand, so I will, before I end prematurely, go ahead, George.
Okay, had to find the unmute. Yeah, I just want to express something about the possibility of narrowing it down to 1 lane in each direction. When Okay, prior to the installation of the traffic signal at Cronin and Pruneridge, but after Pruneridge was narrowed to one lane in each direction from Pomeroy to Lawrence, it was impossible to make a left-hand turn onto Pruneridge from Cronin during the commute hours, especially the morning commute. Now, I believe the reason for that was that commuters that normally used Pruneridge anticipated the narrowing at Pomeroy, so they started forming one lane of traffic prior to approaching Cronin, headed towards the Apple campus. So I think that's probably going to happen in other places if the road is narrowed to one lane in each direction. And we can't have traffic signals at every intersection. So I just urge you to consider that as you think about the possibility of one lane in each direction. And I know what you said about cars making left-hand turns becoming a temporary roadblock, but that's not the same as a constant stream of traffic in one lane that you can't break through. Because prior to the narrowing of Pruneridge at Pomeroy, there was always a way to get through because the cars were spaced out enough in two lanes. But as soon as they all felt they had to get into one lane, it just became impossible to break through. So I hope you consider that in your design.
Thanks, George. Thanks for that feedback and thanks for your firsthand experience. All right, as I mentioned, we'll stick around. Randall, go ahead, Randall.
Okay, since we're going to be talking about Pomeroy, I think that right turn lane that goes to Pomeroy, that's really, it may have been a good idea before it got implemented, but in practice, you have at least a few times every light iteration, somebody will intentionally race through the intersection and try to jam in to the left. And it's like, it's not by accident. They're doing it on purpose. And so I think that's really a poor design. It doesn't really help to let cars, freely turn onto Pomeroy because they're going to be backed up anyway further up the road because, the light at Lawrence is basically the gating thing. In fact, traffic was backing up past Pomeroy anyway, in the morning. So I think it would be better if that were, one lane on both sides of Pomeroy. Because I think, that's, creating a problem with a lot of drivers trying to cheat and jamming in to the through lane, from that Pomeroy lane.
Thanks, Randall. Appreciate that comment. Something that I think we can definitely look at. Great, and Frank's come in, I think, just with a comment as well, just to add on and reinforce that comment that we just heard. Cars definitely try and cheat, it's unsafe. Okay, we had a question from Ben. Is the Thursday meeting available to look at? The Thursday meeting, maybe was unclear. The Thursday meeting is a duplication, exactly the same information that we provided today happened on Thursday. The recording for both meetings will be available, I'd say probably next week, if not within 5 to 7 business days after this meeting. We just need to get it pulled off the servers and then posted on the city's website. But that will be available if you want to go back and review any of the comments you heard from participants on Thursday night, but it's the exact same material. Good question. Okay, Scott, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Scott. Go ahead with your comment or question.
Yes, I was talking to the ether. How do we get a hold of the link to the recording?
Oh, Ben, will you post? I hope everybody's been able to see the chat box that Ben's been able to post out. There's a project website. Ben, could you just push that out again? It's santaclaraca.gov/Pruneridge Ave plan, Scott. And if you go there, everything about this project will be listed there. Our surveys that are live now, our voicemail information, email link, and also the links to these workshops recordings will be there.
Muchas gracias, as we say.
De nada.
Y adios.
Well, it's definitely a smaller crowd, but really great questions, good, robust discussion. I really appreciate everybody providing their firsthand, lived experiences near residents on the corridor, giving us experience about the history of this corridor and asking good, thoughtful questions that's going to only make this a better set of concepts so that when we bring this to your elected officials and decision makers, they can be informed about the benefits, what the community is interested in, and what the community is concerned about. So thanks everybody for being here. I don't want to end this prematurely. This keeps on going. So every time I think everybody's done asking a question, something pops up. So we'll be here for a few more minutes. If you want to ask a question, of course, feel free to do so. But if you need to drop off, we'll just say thanks. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate it.
Okay, well, at this point, I think we can just say have a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank
Take care.
you once again.
All right. Bye-bye.